Wow. They actually made 3 of these things, huh? Okay. If you've been with the channel for a while, then you know that I have not been a fan of the Venom movies, to put it lightly. From minute one, I found them to be obnoxious, awkward, stupid, terribly written, made awful use of the Venom character, and were so horrendously, horribly, painfully unfunny that I would liken watching them to watching She-Hulk Attorney at Law. So when reactions for this one started coming out, with people saying things like, it's the best one of the trilogy, it's better than the first 2, I was like, yeah, right. Who do you think you're fooling? You fucking pathetic shills. How much did Amy Pascal have to pay you to say that? These films have not been on an upward trajectory, okay? I absolutely hated the first one, and the second one was somehow even worse. Hell, if reviewing this wasn't my job, I would have walked out of the first movie and never come back. So I took one look at the early reviews, laughed my ass off at the absurdity of it all, and then stopped paying attention. But just for argument's sake, let's say the reviews were right and this was somehow the best Venom movie yet. Considering where the bar is, all that could mean is that it went from god-awful to just plain shitty. It was with that attitude that I went to see Venom: The Last Dance. And you know what? I am man enough to admit when I'm wrong. Believe it or not, I think this actually was better than the first 2. It wasn't good, but it was better than the first 2. And let me be clear, okay? When I say it's better, I mean that if Venom 1 and 2 were like a 2 out of 10, then Venom 3 is maybe a 2.5. It's technically better, but technically is the key word here. Any quote-unquote improvements the movie makes don't happen because they did something good, it's just because they momentarily toned down the bad stuff once or twice. For example, for my money, one of the worst things about these movies right from the jump has always been the humor, or what the movies think is humor. Everything I said about the humor when I reviewed Venom 1 and 2 still stands. These things are just not funny. 3 movies and I have not laughed one f***ing time, because it's an actor who is not a comedian, has no comedic timing, performing really awkward, unfunny jokes with a scene partner who can't even be there on the set with him when he does it because the partner is completely CG. And the comedy in this one is every bit as bad as it was in the first 2 movies. There are scenes in a bar and a casino and some underground illegal dog kennel where the jokes fall so flat I felt secondhand embarrassment for Tom Hardy. It's like that scene in the first Joker movie where Arthur does his stand-up routine and just dies 1,000 deaths, but at least that movie knew that Arthur wasn't funny, which was the whole point. These Venom movies genuinely think they're being hilarious, and the jokes never get any better. There's just not as many of them this time, because in the first 2 films, the jokes leaned very heavily on Eddie and the symbiote not getting along, and the symbiote constantly annoying the f*** out of Eddie. Now the 2 of them are kind of friends, I guess, so we don't get that anymore. We're not wasting loads of screen time on them trying to fix their relationship. Now that screen time is getting wasted on other stuff, so they didn't come up with any new jokes, and God knows there's still plenty of terrible ones in there. They just stopped doing some of the old ones that were never funny in the first place. But what greases the wheels a little bit is that this is the last Venom movie, thank Christ. The Last Dance is a definitive ending for this version of Venom, so it tries to play things a little more serious, at least in the 3rd act, which, for the record, was the only act I stayed awake all the way through. So fewer jokes overall means the awkwardness was toned down. It's still garbage, but there's a brief stretch where it's not hot garbage. When we're not in that stretch, though, holy shit. The writing in this movie is so lame-brained and so half-assed, it's actually kind of impressive. There are multiple major plot points in this film that only happen because the characters are being so unimaginably f***ing stupid that they would give the characters from Madam Web a run for their money. For instance, the story involves Eddie and the symbiote being on the run from these symbiote hunting creatures because they have something the villain wants. And they can't assume their Venom form because when they do that, the creatures will sense where they are and hunt them down, but when they're not Venom, they're basically invisible to these things. So all they have to do to avoid detection, to stay hidden from these creatures, is not become Venom. As long as they don't do that, they're safe. But then the plot needs to happen, and because the writers were smoking something strong enough to kill brain cells by the millions when they wrote this, they do become Venom, but not for a good reason or even one that makes sense. Perish the thought. It's not because they're in danger or because they need to help someone who's in danger or anything like that. That would actually be understandable. No, it's because the symbiote wants to have a dance party. Yeah. The symbiote wants to dance. They both know that if they assume their Venom form, the creatures will know exactly where they are and find them, but the symbiote just can't stop itself from getting its groove on and dancing the night away, so Venom dances in a sequence so f***ing absurd I wanted to gouge out my eyes, and well, wouldn't you know it, the creatures then know exactly where they are and find them because Venom is a f***ing idiot. And it's not just him. The supporting cast is dumb as a bag of hammers too. Like, there's this family of tourists that Eddie meets, these parents and their 2 young kids. And the dad is this big sci-fi nut. He's crazy about aliens, wants to see real aliens. He's dragging his family along with him to search for real aliens. And eventually the plot needs some innocent people to be put in harm's way, so we're gonna have this family of blithering dumbasses break into a government installation to go sightseeing for f***ing aliens right before the shit hits the fan with loads of symbiotes f***ing shit up everywhere just so Venom has someone to save when all you really want at that point is for these clowns to die so you don't have to spend any more time with them. And we have to spend so much time with these people. The supporting cast from the previous films is gone now, so for some reason the filmmakers thought they needed to introduce new characters to replace them, and for f***'s sake, the new characters are even more worthless than the old ones! First, there's the family, who Eddie goes on a road trip with, during which absolutely nothing f***ing happens and the movie grinds to a screeching halt. But there's also this doctor character who gets a weird backstory about her brother dying in a lightning storm, which makes no goddamn sense at all when you see it in a flashback, and that gets mentioned a couple times throughout the movie. So you figure the backstory with the brother has to mean something, has to factor into the story somehow, has to be going somewhere, but it doesn't. It goes nowhere, it means nothing, it's only there to fill time. Hell, the doctor herself doesn't even really do anything. She's there to spout exposition and not much else. She might be the most prominent character outside of Eddie and the symbiote, and if you cut her out of the movie, I don't think the story would be affected at all. But setting aside the excruciating attempts at comedy, the idiotic plot devices, the worthless side characters, and pointless subplots that do nothing but hold the movie back, by far, the most worthless thing in this film is the villain. Possibly the stupidest thing they ever did with the symbiotes in the comics was give them lore. The symbiotes used to be special. They were so freaking cool when they were just this mysterious alien organism that was dangerous as hell and no one really knew anything about. But now they've got their own planet and their own society, and there's a symbiote god and so much other stupid shit, and it's all so freaking goofy and dumb. So when I heard that Null was gonna be the big bad of this movie, I just facepalmed. I couldn't imagine a stupider way to go. And it seemed like even the movie realized that this was a dumb idea because Null is barely in this thing. I think he only appears in 2 or 3 scenes, unless he showed up during the times when I nodded off. He might be on screen for about 60 seconds total, and he does absolutely f***ing nothing. He just sits there trying to look all scary and crap and sends some of those creatures to hunt down Venom. That's it. That's all he does in the whole movie. So the real big bad of the film isn't Null, it's the creatures. Because the creatures are the only ones who actually do anything. I'm serious. Null might genuinely be the most worthless comic book movie villain of all time. I mean, there are arguably villains who suck more, but I can't think of a single one who ever did less than this motherfucker. Not that him being in more of the film would have made it better. It wouldn't have, because even after 3 movies, these idiots still have no idea what to do with any of their characters. And they never understood the symbiotes at all, obviously. They're still ignoring powers that the symbiotes should have while giving them completely random new powers that they shouldn't have. Like, the symbiotes can't mimic human clothing like they do in the comics, but there's a symbiote with super speed like the Flash. There's one that glows in the dark and has fire powers, which... What? Fire is literally one of their weaknesses! What the shit is going on here? Also, there's another symbiote that has 2 heads. Unless there was a 2-headed dude running around Area 51 that I didn't notice, I don't know how that happens. And then they try to throw in some meaningless Easter eggs like, hey look, it's Lasher and Agony from the comics. Yeah? So what? They make an appearance, but the filmmakers obviously didn't give a shit about those characters. Not that they're big characters in the comics, they aren't. So why should I care if you throw them into the climax for empty fan service? Because that's all this was. Here's a crazy thought. Instead of throwing more shit at the wall in the climax, how about you pay more attention to the second act? Because holy moly was that thing phoned in. No joke, there's about a 20-25 minute stretch in the middle of the movie where nothing, and I do mean nothing, happens. Eddie goes on a road trip with the dumbass family, does some weird recurring gag about losing his shoes, and screws around in a casino. That right there, that's the second act. And the only reason why I didn't hate it more than I did is because the plot is so stupid and nonsensical that nothing happening was honestly preferable to something happening. Because when something happens, that's when it gets annoying. And there are a few quieter moments sprinkled in there during this part where the symbiote very briefly gets less obnoxious as it reflects on its life with Eddie and the choices they've made together. And in those moments, I said to myself, you know what? I almost don't hate this, because it was a tiny respite with the symbiote being thoughtful and candid for a change instead of annoying the f*** out of me with its usual shtick. But then the moment ended and it went back to the same old routine that made me want to slit my wrists in the first two movies. You. But hidden in there is the reason why I say The Last Dance is slightly less irritating than the others. And the reason is because it's the last one. Tom Hardy says he's not doing anymore. They knew it was the last one going in, and they treated it as such. This is the end of the Venom character, at least until Sony reboots it. That means that when the climax rolls around, they kind of drop some of the obnoxious, stupid crap these movies have been full of, not all of it, but some of it, and just tried to do an ending. And it's not necessarily a happy ending. It made me happy, but that's only because I hate these dumpster fire films and cannot f***ing stand this version of Venom. So, no spoilers, but if you're like me and think this trilogy has been flaming trash from the very beginning, that ending is gonna be cathartic for you. It damn sure was for me. So they knew this was their final go-around, and they treated it like it had some finality. And that's why this climax was pretty much the one part of any of these movies that I was kind of okay with. Not that there wasn't plenty of stupid stuff going on, there was, but they toned it down and tried, in their own very special, incompetent way, to do some big action set pieces and focus on putting a period at the end of the story with a little bit of meaning, though I think meaning is a relative term in this case. And none of it is great or even very good, but they tried a little bit harder than they usually do, and hey, at least I was able to stay awake through this part. Couldn't say that during the first hour of the movie, that's for sure. Yeah, so that's the highest praise I can give this film, and I stayed awake during the climax still makes it better than the first two. Oh my god, this trilogy sucked. And that's all she wrote. Venom: The Last Dance is really bad. But the bar has been set so low at this point for the Venom movies, not to mention the Sony Spider-Verse films in general, that really bad honestly felt like a step up. But just in case you're confused by me damning it with faint praise, this is not a recommend. Duh. This movie was crap, and the Venom trilogy might be in the conversation for worst film trilogy I've ever seen. It's certainly the most obnoxious. But hey, silver lining, at least it's over now. It's done, it's finished, and nothing of value was lost. Now we just have to get through Kraven, and then there'll be no more of these atrocious Sony Spider-Verse movies left in the pipeline. I can't wait. At last, we'll finally have something good to look forward to now that the studio will finally be done shamelessly prostituting Spider-Man's rogues gallery with one trash movie after another just to make a quick... Well, at least we don't have to worry about that Stiltman movie. Yet. Thanks so much for watching. While you're here, ding that bell icon and follow my social media so you can always be notified when I upload new stuff. For the record, the notifications kinda suck these days, so following my Twitter is definitely the best way. Link is down there. And don't forget to do all the other YouTube things by smashing that like button, leaving a comment, sharing the video, subscribing if you haven't already, and making sure you're still subscribed, because what really deserves to be hunted by alien freaks sent by some lame-ass non-entity villain who's just sitting on his ass in another dimension doing absolutely f***ing nothing is the YouTube algorithm. That's all for now. I'll be back with more soon. Take care, stay tuned. I'll see you next time.